Welcome to Indigo House. I'm Leni Sorensen. Here in the Virginia Piedmont is where I live, work, and teach. My lessons range from the skills of enslaved cooks in the 19th century Southern kitchens to home provisioning in our own kitchens, from how to can tomatoes, to create a pantry, or to butcher a chicken. Join me as I tend my animals, care for my garden, and cook in my kitchen, and welcome you to my table. Welcome. Today I am going to talk about chickens. As some of you probably know, I raise chickens. I've got 17 laying hens, and I'm going to have 50 meat birds coming in the spring, chicks that I'll raise. So it's something that I think about real seriously, and looking at the past and the self-reliance of enslaved communities and families. I'm just really struck at how self-reliant people had to be. We've got this great record, written record, of the group, the people that lived at Monticello, that come to us in a document written by a young girl that was set to accept the produce and food, the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson, every Sunday for 3 years. From August to October, generally, when the president was taking his vacation at Monticello. So he wrote all this stuff down, and the amounts are astounding, and I think they will astound you to really look at the totals. So we've got chickens. We got 988 chickens sold into the Jefferson household, into their kitchen over that period of time. That's 82 dozen birds, which is just an amazing number of birds. It's the eggs that really get me. 483 dozen eggs were sold into the household economy and paid for. That's the other interesting thing. That's the irony, of course, that the enslaved people weren't supposed to have money, but you know, you got to pay for these eggs, because otherwise you're never going to get any, because nobody would have provided them. But what is really astounding to me, and what I really want to look at, because people kind of leave out this part of the story, is that how did they raise all these chickens? Where were these chickens produced? Much of the garden and livestock production within the enslaved community, it was happening just on the bare surface of the ground and isn't really discernible archaeologically. So we have to really kind of look behind and realize, okay, if you have that many chickens, you got that many eggs, you got to really have some stuff going on. And so how much garden space, say, was used to produce corn or other fodder for the chickens, and were the chickens allowed to free range? And if so, who supervised them and who put them away at night and watched them? Because you just don't have that many chickens to sell unless you're protecting them and taking care of them. They're not just wandering around in the woodland without supervision. So then we can look at, okay, how many hen houses and nest boxes and brood cages were necessary to raise that number of chickens, and who built those structures. A brood box is, if you're going to have a hen, she's got to sit for 21 days on those eggs, and she's got to be protected. She's not going to just be able to just sit there and not have foxes and snakes and raccoons and random dogs and cats and all of the other kinds of predators that would have been common at the time. So you've got to protect her till her brood all hatches out. Then you got to protect her and the brood, and you have to raise them, that brood of chickens, enough so that you can then sell them as young chickens ready to eat. So if you have, in one case, you've got Peter Hemmings was paid 12 shillings for 11 pullets on just one April Day in 1807. Well, that's a lot of chickens. So where did he get those chickens? How many hens did it take to get those? Is that 2 or 3 hens between them that raised that? He has to have kept them protected so that he could gather them up and butcher them and send them up to the kitchen. You've got water. How are they getting water? Are the chicken yards fenced? Is that how that worked? We don't really know. Are there experts among the group who are really good at raising chickens, and are they kind of swapping and bartering their expertise for other things like vegetables and other garden truck or other kinds of jobs, sewing things in exchange for raising chickens? We just don't have that kind of information, but we have to look at it and realize that in order to have that many chickens, 988 chickens over a 3-year period and 483 dozen eggs over a 3-year period, somebody's got to be raising some chickens. And so that's really my question. In this record, there were 71 adults were named as having been selling into the documented record. Then that way we don't really know, were they selling for other people who didn't come forward, or how. We just don't have any idea. This is not counting the other kinds of foodstuffs that are mentioned in this document, which were, melons and cabbage and cucumbers and Simlin squashes and potatoes and sprouts and strawberries and fish, and just an astounding amount of garden truck. But mostly for me, it is all those chickens and all those eggs, and how the community must have worked together in order to make sure that this bounty was available to be able to sell for the kind of cash money that they wanted to have. The other thing that we might ask is, how are these birds secured over the winter? I live in Virginia, just 18 miles from Monticello, to tell you the truth, and it's cold out there. And these hens have to be protected, and when it snows or when it's below freezing. So how did they do that? And I think when we look at enslaved communities and their gardens and their production, we have to dig further and kind of open out how was it actually done? What are the processes that needed to be done in order for the community to be self-reliant and self-sustaining? The last question that I might have is, how many of these animals that they raised were not sold but were used within the community? So how many more eggs and more chickens were produced that the community used themselves in their own food economy? How many more vegetables were raised that were used in their economy? So it's a question that I think helps us, if we look at any of these issues of self-reliance, is to then drill down and see how people actually did what they needed to do in order to survive.